Do you know that there are 12 Friday the 13th movies? They made 12 of them. And that's not to mention that there's apparently like video games and a TV series. Like they have made a ton of media around the original Friday the 13th movie. It's a bit of a stereotype with horror films, is that they make one pretty good one and then they proceed to make a million that oftentimes by the end of their saga have nothing to do with the original film that was made. But, you know, we're gonna keep making them as long as they make money, so might as well keep going. Now, 12 movies is a lot, I think, even for horror movies. At the moment, there's only 7 Screams. I did not look up how many Halloweens because they keep remaking them and redoing them, and I don't even know if they count as sequels at this point anymore. But there's a ton of them. But this is something that's been going on in horror for a while. The original Frankenstein film has 7 sequels. There are 8 films total in this legacy franchise. And that's nuts! I've seen the first one, obviously. I've seen the second one. And I even indulged myself in watching the third one because those are the first 3, and those are the ones that Boris Karloff plays the monster in. And then I stopped and I was like, I don't really need to watch much more than this. I don't have a hankering for the ghost of Frankenstein at the moment. But, and then you wind up in a situation like, I don't know, preparing for a Frankenstein trivia game, and you think, yeah, I should probably watch some of those other movies too, huh? And I did. I watched all 8 of these films. I bought this Legacy collection a couple of years ago, specifically knowing at some point I would have to watch all of these movies. And I did. And I was right that they're not very good. But I watched them, and that's what matters. But what matters more than that is while I was watching them, I got confused. I got confused often about 2 things specifically. I got confused about who these people were and where the hell we were. Because, the first 2 films are a continuation of each other. They take place, the second one takes place immediately after the first one ends. The third one takes place a little bit later and deals with the son of Frankenstein in the movie The Son of Frankenstein. But then from there on out, I didn't really know who we were talking to. We had guys just kind of popping up all over. Some of them were related, some of them were colleagues. Some of them had no relations whatsoever. At some point, a baroness pops up, and I'm like, where were you in the first couple of movies? And so, I decided, as much as I don't want to, I'm gonna rewatch these movies. But this time, I'm gonna take notes. I'm in fact going to take notes in this book, because it's very fancy, and I feel like it'll make watching these not very good movies feel a lot better. It's all leather bound and stuff, and it's got these really cool pages. I'm holding it upside down. But it's got some really cool, and the edges are rough and cool. I'm gonna look like a cool guy at a Ren fair, My Frankenstein research. My goal is to watch all 8 Universal films. We're gonna track the family tree. We're gonna track the map of the journey. And we're gonna figure out what the hell is going on. Nobody asked for this. Nobody cares about these movies. Nobody talks about them. The Frankenstein Reddit doesn't even talk about these movies, and that's where the Frankenstein freaks hang out. Nobody's asking for this. I'm asking for it. I'm asking for it because I want to. And it's my channel, so I'm going to. So I've got my journal. I've got my DVDs. We're gonna watch these movies. We're gonna put them on a lovely little chart, and we're gonna figure this all out. And I'd say we're gonna do it together, but you're not here with me. I'm gonna do it, and you're gonna enjoy watching it. So let's go. Hi, it's Sam from the future. The one with the broken leg? Don't worry about that yet. I started this project and realized I didn't really give any kind of plot summary for the movies as I'm going through them, because I'm just focusing on the family tree and where we are. The reason why I did that is because the plot of these movies is relatively the same with very little variation, and if there is variation, I usually go over that within that movie. But just so there's that kind of understanding, the general plot of
all of these movies is guy makes or revives a monster, problems. That's it. That's the plot of these movies. And there's differences here and there of which guy, how does he do it, how does he figure out how to do it. Most of that's not relevant for this particular project, so generally speaking, you can safely assume the plot of any given movie is guy makes or revives a monster, problems. And with that, let's go! This is the family tree after having watched the first Frankenstein film, Frankenstein from 1931. I took all of my lovely notes here. I'm notating locations with dashes and family trees with pluses. And so these are the facts that I accumulated purely from the movie alone, with minor speculation tossed in from how well I know the book. So for the family tree, our main character obviously here is Henry Frankenstein, and that is Henry Frankenstein because I feel like a lot of people get that confused, actually. It was certainly a surprise for me when I watched it the first time, which is that the protagonist of these films is not named Victor. His name is Henry. There is a character named Victor, Victor Moritz. He's Henry's best friend and sort of seems to be like a pseudo-Elizabeth love interest. But, yeah, no, they swapped Victor and Henry's name. I don't know why, but they did that. So, yeah, our main character here is Henry Frankenstein. His main love interest that he's engaged to is Elizabeth. She's never actually named in the film. I'm assuming we're going with Lavenza, as that's the name from the novel, but that's technically not said in the film, so I can't confirm that. Again, we're going purely on information that I absorbed from the movie itself. Next thing to know, the other main character that we deal with here is Baron Frankenstein, Victor's dad, which also establishes this is a family of power. They are landed gentry, essentially, in the area. They have the status of baron, and they seem to have a lot of, maybe not control over this city, but certainly influence in that, like, the burgomaster comes to their house and is like, when's the wedding gonna be? Because the whole city wants to be in on this wedding. So they clearly have some amount of power here in this very, rural city. Presumably that means there's also a Baroness Frankenstein. The Baroness is mentioned a few times, mostly in reference to when the Baron is talking about his wedding, because there's a scene where the Baron gives Victor these orange blossoms that were actually worn by his great-grandfather, Henry's great-grandfather. I'm gonna struggle with keeping Henry and Victor apart, because in my mind, the character that he is Victor Frankenstein, despite the fact that they changed his name. So you're just gonna have to bear with me on this one. If I say Victor, know that I probably mean Henry. Henry's great-grandfather and great-grandmother wore these orange blossoms at their wedding that had been passed down. And Baron Frankenstein, when he got married to Victor's mother, Henry's mother, he put those orange blossoms on her head, and he is now giving them to Henry to put on Elizabeth's. They don't actually wind up getting married, which is why I haven't drawn a line between them. They don't get married in this movie. They get married in the next movie. So until they're actually married, she remains a distant name listed to the side here. So yeah, we know there's at least 3 generations of Frankenstein that have been in this area, who have been established here in this location, presumably at Castle Frankenstein. Like, I hesitate to call it that, just because it doesn't get called that in the movie, but clearly where they are, the Frankenstein estate of some variety, they've been there for a bit, and their family has established reputation in this area. Only other things that we really know, the Baron's grandfather, who bought a bottle of wine that his wife wouldn't let him drink, and thus it is saved in the family cellar until today at Henry's wedding when they drink it, and all the way to like the last shot of the movie where the Baron drinks a glass of that was supposed to go to Henry, but he decides not to give him because Loki, the Baron, might be an alcoholic, which sounds like may or may not be a genetic trait. So there you go. So that is as much as we have from the family tree for this movie. Not a ton of information, mostly just establishing the family. I know it's gonna get crazier from here, if only by movie 3 there will be children here to talk about. As of this moment, this is what we have for the Frankensteins. So where are we? Purely from information from the original Frankenstein film. The first location name that is given to us is Goldstadt Medical College, which is presumably called that because it's in the city of Goldstadt. And the people who go to this college are clearly like, they look very modern, they look very chic of the era, as opposed to the very like rural German looking peasants that we have in the rest of the film. We know Victor's tower, Victor's like laboratory, is set up in an old watchtower that is near the village of Goldstadt. So we have Goldstadt as sort of an anchoring point. Though it's not specifically named as the name of the village that like Victor's family is connected with, where like the wedding and such happens. I tried to find like any signage, but most of the signage was written in German, and I don't speak that. So this is where, if I figure out a translation, I'm gonna put the translation that I learned, especially if it's got any factual information that can help us with our information. So the only other really information that we have, we've got a burgomaster, which is essentially the mayor of a like Dutch or Swiss or German, which presumably we're in a German area. Specifically, we're looking somewhere in the Alps, because this is a very mountainy kind of area. We're seeing a lot of very traditional, like Bavarian style clothing and accoutrement. I can't think of a better word for it. We don't have a definitive name for the village that we're at. We have the name of Goldstadt, kind of near us, which presumably comes from Ingolstadt, which is where Victor goes to university in the original novel. So we got Goldstadt nearby, and Victor's family is clearly able to travel to his laboratory pretty quick. It doesn't seem to take like multiple days. It seems to be semi-nearby. So we are either in Goldstadt or just at the very least near Goldstadt. And we're somewhere in an unspecified village in the German Alps countryside area. So from just the first movie, that is what we know about where we are. We're in Goldstadt. There's a sign on the Burgomaster's office in this one that says Burgomaster of Goldstadt. So we're in Goldstadt. It doesn't seem like much of a college town, but you know, good for the people of Goldstadt. They've got tons of doctors, or student doctors nearby, I guess. We're in Goldstadt. Go to the family tree. So for Bride of Frankenstein, the family tree is roughly the same. The main things that have changed are apparently the Baron died in the 2 seconds between movie 1 and 2. We end on him in movie 1, toasting to the health of the son of the House of Frankenstein. And then movie 2, we get an offhanded remark from Dr. Pretorius saying, I guess it's Baron now, Henry. So now we have Baron Henry Frankenstein. Dad's dead. Sorry, Dad. We really don't touch on that at all at any point during the movie. Elizabeth is now a part of the family. They officially get married. they're immediately swept off and kidnapped for illegal science shenanigans. Or at least Elizabeth is. Henry kind of just goes for it because he's a freak like that. And, you know, I respect it. That is it for the family tree for Bride of Frankenstein. Next is Son of Frankenstein. So, let's see what that looks like. So, fun fact, I broke my leg. So I've got a lot of time to work on this project now. And we're gonna make the best of it. And I'm gonna try not to go insane. We'll see how that goes. Welcome to The Son of Frankenstein. It's about the Son of Frankenstein. Our main character here is now Wolf Frankenstein. He is a doctor. He is the son of Henry and Elizabeth, presumably. We technically don't have any confirmation about his mother. He doesn't say anything, but they were married in the last movie, and I'm assuming Victor didn't get divorced and remarried at any point. So, Wolf, son of Henry and Elizabeth. Henry is now dead. Henry died between the last movie and this one. We see his tomb, and it doesn't have any dates on it, so that doesn't help me out too much there. But Henry is now dead, and so Wolf is coming to this village that is like his family legacy to kind of deal with the estate and with the people, essentially, and just getting things back in order now that his father has died. This plot might sound familiar to you, because this is what Young Frankenstein is based off of. So the main additions to the family tree here, we've got Wolf. He is married to a woman named Elsa, and they have a very young child named Peter. Peter in this film was played by an actor named Donnie Dunnigan. You might know Donnie Dunnigan as the voice of Bambi. I know him as the guy who signed this cool picture for me. Here's Donnie Dunnigan. In this photo, he is wired to Boris Karloff's hip because they were doing a lot of takes and they didn't want to drop a child. And so, yeah, Donnie Dunnigan signed this for me. He is the only living cast member from the original trio of films. Again, because he was a child. But yeah, this is a cool little thing I've got in my collection. The other addition to this board here, there's a comment made by Igor in this movie that the monster is Wolf's brother, but the monster's mother is Lightning. I debated putting it on the board, and I thought it was just silly enough that, yeah, I'll put it on there. Here's our newest additions to the Frankenstein family tree. Nothing too crazy. The film was called Son of Frankenstein, and we got the son of Frankenstein. We even got the son of Frankenstein. So, you know, we're doing great. Then on to our next investigation point. Where are we? They changed the name of the village. It's called Frankenstein now. So at some point between Bride and this movie, they renamed the village after the guy that they hate. I know in a Doyleistic reading, I would simply go, oh, you know, either the scriptwriters didn't compare notes or didn't double check that, you know, has the village been given a name yet? I guess not, so I'll write one. I am not looking at any of this from a Doyleist perspective. I am purely Watsonian in this moment. The village must have been renamed in between the time that monster done rampaged and now, and we renamed it after all these guys that we hate. I don't know why they did that, but apparently they did that. So now the village is called Frankenstein. The next thing, there is a comment made by Wolf at one point that the servants of the house look Tyrolean, and I didn't know what that meant, so I googled it. And Tyrol is this historical region in the Alps, kind of North Italy, West Austria. And the crucial thing here is the reason Wolf makes that comment is he's like, everybody here looks like they're from a different country because nobody in this province wants to be hired by the Frankenstein. So they had to hire outside of the country to get other people in. So we are not in Tyrol, but we're near it. We're just outside northern Italy and West Austria. So, that doesn't tell us exactly where we are, but it tells us exactly where we're not, which is progress. Other things here, Henry's lab is now next to the estate. You'll remember in the first film, it's like established as being a distance away. Like, we had to travel there. We had to go over there. And it seemed to be a bit of a hike. Not like too far. It was seemingly within like a day's walk. But we had to go there. And here it's literally like across the way. It's just across, I think they said it was across a ravine. Yeah, it's just across a ravine. So it's right next to the house. To the point where there's secret passages leading from the laboratory into the estate. Which, I suppose, since it was established as being a watchtower originally, would make sense that it might have, like, paths to, like, the local lord's house, kind of, in a military sense of, like, you know, if you see danger a-coming, you want to warn people as quick as possible. But still, it seemed like it moved from being miles away to right next door. I don't know how to square that particular circle here. I can imagine a bunch of people renaming a village, but moving a whole burnt-out tower that now has these sulfur pits in it? Your guess is as good as mine. And then the last thing, I guess doesn't really establish where we are, but I feel like it's good to establish precedent. At the end of this movie, Wolf, like, gives the deed to Castle Frankenstein and the estate and the tower and the laboratory. He gifts it all back to the village. So everything that was in the Frankenstein name has now been given to the village of Frankenstein. So all of that property now belongs to the people. What does that mean? I don't know exactly. And I don't know if it's even worth pointing out, but I'm pointing it out just in case. The first thing that happens in this movie is the villagers of the village of Frankenstein decide that they're gonna blow up Castle Frankenstein. Which is their right, I suppose, since the castle and such did get deeded to them. They decide to explode. At the very least, they explode the lab. That is primarily the thing that we see get destroyed. There's technically not a specific shot of the castle itself getting exploded, but they decide to do some detonation in this general area, which, since we made the lab right next to and directly connected to the castle, we can assume there is at least some amount of damage to that estate. To start off with, Wolf is no longer our protagonist. We have a new protagonist here, the other son of Frankenstein, Ludwig Frankenstein, who is also a doctor of the mind, specifically diseases of the mind. So it's nice that both of Henry's sons did wind up being doctors. It seems he makes a comment about Wolf having been exiled, which I assume just means that he's not going back to the village of Frankenstein anytime soon, since it seemed like he was already coming over from America anyway. So our main character is Ludwig. Presumably at some point he was married to a woman, as he has a daughter, Elsa, so we now have two Elsa Frankensteins on the chart. I don't think that will come back to bother us too much, but it is funky that there's two of them. At the end of the film, Ludwig is presumed dead. We technically don't see him die, but we also don't see him walk off into the sunset like his daughter Elsa does. The last we see of him, he is still inside his, like, laboratory house, where the fire has started and also has filled with poison gas. So Ludwig is presumed dead by the end of this film, with only his daughter surviving him. Ludwig encounters the monster and Igor in this film, and Igor makes the same comment about the monster's mother being lightning. So if I hadn't put it on then, I surely would have put it on now, but I did put it on then because I thought it was a good bit. So But yeah, these are our main additions to the family tree. The only, like, main thing I put over here, at the end of the film, Igor's brain has been put into the monster's body, which I don't think technically becomes plot relevant, but I feel like should at the very least be noted. He is also blind now. Another fact that, if I remember correctly, doesn't really come up moving forward, but I also felt should probably be made known. That is the main additions to the family tree here. We'll see if anything comes of it, because I don't remember, going forward, I don't remember any specifically Frankenstein characters. Like, as far as I'm aware, they don't build off of too many of these branches. If there's anything, I think there are branches that get added, but it's been a hot minute since I've watched some of these later films, and I know they get pretty wild, so we'll take it as it comes. For right now, here's what we've got. A relatively normal looking family tree. Ignore the fact that lightning is a member of the family tree, though. Visaria. We're gonna be spending a lot of time in Visaria. If I remember correctly, which I might not, in total fairness, Visaria is gonna be a major location for the rest of the films, barring Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Because, honestly, Visaria is the reason I started to do this project. Because if I remember correctly, there's things that happen in one movie in the town of Visaria, and then in the next movie they're like, we've got to get to Visaria. And I was like, weren't we in Visaria? At least in this film, we are in the city of Visaria. It seems to be pretty close to the village of Frankenstein. Like, it's not that far. Granted, we're not shown exactly how far Igor and the monster travel, but it doesn't seem to be that far away. It's certainly far enough away that when Ludwig's secretary tells him, like, there's a guy from the village of Frankenstein in the lobby, that's enough of an oddity that he's like, I'll go see to it at once. But, you know, it seems like they're not that far. They both have a very similar kind of Bavarian style of folksiness. Visaria seems to be a little bit more modern. You're seeing a lot less, you know, folk dancing in the streets and such kind of a thing. But it seems to be still in the same kind of Bavarian area, which raises some questions for me, just of why was Wolf an American, but Ludwig isn't? Like, when did Ludwig establish his practice here? Was he born in Frankenstein and he moved away? Like, because in Son of Frankenstein, there seems to be a familiarity in Wolf and his family with the Frankenstein castle. Like, they know some of the workers there. Like, Peter has a fondness for one of the maids. And so there seems to be some amount of time that has been spent in that area for that family. For these guys, for Ludwig and Elsa, did they spend time in Village Frankenstein and then they moved to Visaria and haven't looked back? These are questions that will not get answered, by the way, so I'm just kind of asking them at this point. At the very least, Wolf went to Visaria to give him their dad's notes and his notes, because we see that Ludwig has a copy of Wolf's diary and Baron Henry Frankenstein's diary. So also, apparently Henry wrote his diary after his father had died. So, these are questions that will not be answered, but I'm asking them anyway, because I can. Again, it'll never be confirmed, so as far as I'm aware, it's true. of our MCU, we've got an old cinematic universe that's way cooler and has way more werewolves in it. That's right, we are talking about Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman from 1943, which is technically the sequel to The Wolfman, which means our protagonist isn't a Frankenstein, actually. We've got a new guy, Larry Talbot, I've put him in his own little corner over here because he's not a Frankenstein, has no relations to the Frankensteins. He meets one of them in this movie, but otherwise has no relation to them. However, is the protagonist of this movie and will be relevant to the rest of the sequel. So I at the very least put him in his own little Wolfman corner down here to the side. The main plot of this movie is that Larry Talbot, who dies at the end of The Wolfman, is brought back because somebody exposed his corpse to moonlight, and so now he's on a quest to figure out how to die. And so to get that help, he learns about there was a Dr. Frankenstein here and goes to the Frankenstein ruins, and while in those ruins discovers the Frankenstein monster, and the regular thing happens of the monster's awoken, it goes on a bit of a rampage, causes problems, and then is destroyed in some fashion. That won't stop it from coming back in the next movie, but the monsters will die at the end of every movie, and it will not matter. They will be brought back no matter what. Overall, our family tree does not change. But the nice thing is, remember that Baroness that I remembered randomly meeting and was confused about how she fit into the family? That was Elsa. That was Ludwig's daughter, Elsa. Elsa is the Baroness now, which confirms that Ludwig is dead. So we've got a definitive answer on that. There was a brief moment where I then wondered if that meant that Wolf and his entire family was also dead. If Wolf initially had the title of Baron, then that means Wolf was the older brother. And so presumably, if Elsa is the Baroness, that would mean that there was no one else on this branch of the family tree to accept the title. And so I got really worried for, like, the person I was watching the movie with. I had to pause and be like, wait, no, that means Peter died? And then we had a bit of a moment where I talked it through, and they were like, oh, okay, well, if at the end of Son of Frankenstein he deeds everything back to the city, that's kind of him abdicating, right? Because if he abdicates, then that means he's not claiming the title, and so that would then go to the next brother and to his line. And so we're like, oh, thank goodness. I genuinely got so sad thinking about this poor family that's been through as much as they did, who very wisely, once they survived the horror movie that they were in, left and didn't look back. That they were just dead now. It was really sad to me. But that's not the case. Elsa is the rightful Baroness, the rightful inheritor of the Frankenstein name and estate and lands and such. Not that means much. She certainly doesn't seem to have that much power over the village. Like, they're actively like, she's a Frankenstein, we should get rid of her. Because, they're all getting riled up. There is certainly an amount of respect for her still, especially from the mayor, of being like, hey, I want to protect you, I want to look out for you, and, so there's certainly respect, even if it doesn't necessarily come with power. It also seems like Elsa no longer lives in Visaria, because she had to, travel to meet Larry Talbot when he put in an offer for the ruins of her home. So she's clearly, nearby, but it doesn't seem like she lives there anymore, which makes sense. I don't know, would you want to live around the ruins of your dead dad's blasted laboratory. I wouldn't. There's also a comment from Elsa during, there's a big, like, wine festival that's happening, and she makes a lovely comment of saying, like, this reminds me of my childhood. This reminds me of when I was young. And, I really like that as characterization for Elsa, and two, that does give me some confirmation that she was raised in Visaria. So presumably, either she spent a very brief amount of time in the village of Frankenstein, or she was born in Visaria and never left. Until now. In order to find Frankenstein's notes on how he did his experiments, Larry Talbot pretends to be a guy named Taylor, who is interested in buying the ruins of the Frankenstein estate to meet Elsa and to ask her in person, hey, do you know where your dad's experiment notes are? To which she rightfully is like, no, and if I did, I wouldn't tell you. This turns out to be false. She does eventually tell him, but that's beside the point. But yeah, I pleasantly delighted to see Elsa here. I genuinely thought we weren't going to see her again ever. Without her cop boyfriend from the end of Ghost of Frankenstein that she walks into the sunset with. So I don't know what happened to him, if he just like left town or whatever. Because instead she winds up kind of falling for the doctor who's been following Larry Talbot across Europe. Or at the very least, each one of these movies ends with a heterosexual couple walking off into the sunset together, surviving. And in this movie, it's Elsa, once again, but with the doctor. So I don't know if that means they're a couple now, or what, or if, much like her cop boyfriend from the last movie, they walk off hand in hand and will never be seen again. Who knows? Not me. That's what I'm hoping to find out. Overall, yeah, the family tree does not change. We've got Larry here. He'll be relevant for going forward, but other than that, that's the family tree. So from where we are, still in Visaria. We are here in Visaria, and we stay in Visaria. The first half of the movie is about Larry Talbot waking up from being dead and going on his little journey. But once he has a quest of, I need to figure out how to die, we go to Visaria and we stay there, which is nice. Not a lot of traipsing around or nothing. We're in this one town, and we stay there, and we do our science. Everything goes wrong. But, you know, I would expect nothing less from these movies. The main other notes here to make are, Talbot goes on a journey through Europe to try to find the Roma woman that he meets in the first movie, and she's the one who then brings him to Visaria. And as they travel to Visaria, it seems Larry turned into a wolf and killed a few people along the way, because Dr. Mannering is able to track him by following the newspapers that recorded like mutilation deaths of people. And we know those places that he went to were Fontainebleau, which is in France, Aachen, which is in Germany, and then the other one he says is Elrad, and I couldn't find where that is, because the only thing that kept popping up was the name of a company. I tried a couple of different things to try to figure out where, like, if that was like a region or a city or something. Couldn't find anything, so I don't know where Elrad is. And then obviously the last place that he says is Visaria. But at the very least, we know that, like, from France to Germany makes sense, because like we said last time, we think that, you know, Visaria is somewhere near Frankenstein, the village of Frankenstein, which is somewhere in this kind of Alps region, kind of Bavaria area. So it makes sense that he would be there. So if I could figure out where Elrad is, and if I figure that out, here's where it's gonna go. And then we spend the rest of our time in Visaria, which is super helpful. We're in Visaria. And then not necessarily about the journey, but something that I felt was worth noting, since it wound up working out for me with Son of Frankenstein, is just noting that Ludwig's estate, the way that, like, they defeat the monsters in this one, because the monster and the Wolfman wind up getting into a fight in the ruins of Ludwig's blown up estate, and the villagers, more specifically the jerk bartender Vasek, blows up the nearby dam to flood the valley that the estate was in, ? Seems like not a great place to put your estate. The idea was that apparently Ludwig had like water wheels of some variety, water turbines? I don't know. He was using the local like water source as a power source, but he was only able to do that because the river was dammed, and they blew up the dam, flooded the whole place. So now the place is not only ruins, but also was washed out by the water. That is where we're left with this one. We are in Visaria. We found a new way to destroy an already destroyed building. We know we're definitely somewhere in this kind of Germany, Alps area. That is what we've got for Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And since both of those monsters died at the end of this movie, surely there couldn't possibly be another one. Okay. Unfortunately, before I can move on to the next movie, we gotta talk about the Dwight Fry conundrum.
Check this out. Take a look at this. Jesus Christ, Charlie. That right there is the mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
Dwight Fry is the actor who is most known... Technically, he's most known for playing Renfield from the 1931 Dracula film. But he's also known for playing Fritz, the hunchback assistant character from the original Frankenstein movie. This is the character who, due to a centuries-long telephone game, will become known as Igor. He's played these two very iconic horror characters, and in the Frankenstein canon, like, one of the most iconic characters, even if the name does get lost in the sauce a bit. But Dwight Fry went on to be in other Frankenstein movies, and I won't say nobody noticed, but he certainly gets away with it. In Bride of Frankenstein, he plays a sort of henchman character named Carl, who Dr. Pretorius hires to kill a young woman in order to get her heart, because they need a very fresh heart of a young woman to put in the bride. He is eventually killed by the monster, but he is famously played by Dwight Fry. If you look on his IMDb, there is an unconfirmed role from Son of Frankenstein, because in my research, it looks like he was in a scene when the film was being put in Technicolor, and then when they transitioned to being in black and white instead, his scene got cut. But Dwight Fry definitely shows up in the beginning of Ghost of Frankenstein. He's one of the villagers who goes, "Hey, we should blow that castle up." So I choose to believe he's that same villager that would have been in Son of Frankenstein is this villager here. And then, because he's not done, he shows up in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman as a villager in Visaria. And a smarter man than me might let this go. You know, again, somebody who's looking at this from a Doyleist perspective would go, Dwight Fry is an actor, and actors need work, and he was known for playing these kind of crazy characters, as well as, you know, he could fit in pretty good as an extra with a sentence or two. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense that he's going to be there. But we're not doing Doyleistic readings here. We're doing Watsonian. So I gotta make this make sense. And I'm not sure how. So how do we make this work? Well, here's what we know. These two characters exist at the same time. That makes sense. Bride of Frankenstein takes off right after Frankenstein. Could be that we've got two sort of messed up brothers. I mean, they both seem to be kind of a little bit crazy, both a little bit sadistic, and both found good work working for a doctor who feeds into their crazy. So, I mean, that seems about right. That would make a lot of sense. So, sure, let's go from there. The problem is, there's about a 30-year gap between Carl and these other guys who look exactly like Dwight Frye. Initially, when I was starting down this line of ridiculousness, I was like, oh, I guess there's some quadruplets or something, and just kind of moved on from there. And then I remembered that there's a 30-year gap, which then asks the question, did one of these guys have kids? I mean, he couldn't be a sibling, because again, 30-year gap, so he would have to be a son, a nephew of some variety, some further down relation. So if we assume that one of these fellas could have had a kid, and in fact, they're gonna need to have 2 kids, because our villager here lives in Frankenstein, but Rudy lives in Visaria. And they look the exact same. Like, at least Carl and Fritz, like, have some sort of prosthetic or, you know, fake beard, or they did a little bit of work to try to make them look distinct. These two do not. These two look the exact same. So I don't know, maybe whichever one of these guys was getting down, they could have had twins. That makes sense. And maybe one of them decided to stay in Frankenstein, and because that's, you know, the place that he grew up and the place where he wanted to live and establish his family, and he's vehement about destroying the Frankenstein castle. And so maybe that, like, knowing his family legacy, yeah, he would have wanted that place blown up. Maybe that was a little bit of a personal action on his part, of his sort of purging of his ghosts. You know, son of Fritz doesn't roll off the tongue quite nearly as well as son of Frankenstein. But son of Carl is just as bad. I guess the real question is, which one of these guys is more likely to have sex? And that's not a question that I'm gonna ruminate on very long, because I know for every freak, there's someone there to match their freak. So it's possible for anybody on this list. So if this guy decided to stay in Frankenstein, it's just as likely that his twin brother would have felt similarly difficult about their sort of family legacy and wanted to get away from it. He decided to move to Visaria, which is extra funny given that Ludwig Frankenstein also lived in Visaria. The idea of them interacting at any point is very funny to me. Granted, Ludwig probably doesn't know who Rudy is. Ludwig, I mean, he wouldn't have any reason to look into the descendants of that guy, what done helped his father. But Rudy would definitely know who Ludwig is. And that would be really interesting for him. Again, a very interesting story that does not get played out. Rudy's just a guy. He's just a guy hanging out at the village, who at one point does get chased by the Frankenstein monster, which, again, if we're being very... If we're putting this ridiculous idea into the canon, has some real connotations there that have to be terrifying for him. So sure, that's relatively reasonable. A bit of a stretch, but they've made bigger stretches in bigger franchises. I'm looking at you, Scream 5. So if we assume that these two are the twin descendants of one of these guys, sure, that's fine. The problem is, Dwight Frye has been in other Universal monster movies. And unfortunately, especially due to the later films that have a lot of crossover with all of those other Universal monsters, that makes those Dwight Frye's canon with this. So we gotta add a couple of Dwight Fryes on the board here real quick. So Dwight Frye shows up in 2 other Universal monster movies that are made canon with the regular Frankenstein canon. One is a reporter in The Invisible Man. And I know you might be thinking, I don't remember the Invisible Man showing up in any of the Frankenstein sequels. That doesn't make any sense. I know for a fact that the last shot of Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein is the Invisible Man showing up in the boat with Abbott and Costello, as voiced by Vincent Price. So the Invisible Man is a part of... Since Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is considered a Frankenstein sequel, I have to treat it as a part of the canon. As nothing as this role is, I've got to run with it. I don't have a choice. And then, of course, again, Dwight Frye's arguably most iconic role, Renfield from the 1931 Dracula. An amazing performance, truly. But that does put me in the very difficult position of who the heck are these guys and how are they related to these guys? Because both Invisible Man and Dracula definitely seem more set in the era that is the original Frankenstein. And now I know that's tricky because trying to go off of the era that things appear to be set in can directly contradict our little timeline here. If I'm going by, like, fashion history, then yeah, the outfits in Frankenstein look like they're in the 30s, and the outfits from the later ones look like they're in the 40s, because that's when they were set. But there is canonically at least a 30-year gap in between. So I don't totally know how to square this particular circle. The one thing I've got in my favor here is that both of these guys live in England. So, if we go back to my original theory of these two being a set of quadruplets, it's possible that two of them having a kind of deformity, of Fritz having his hunchback, and Carl's funky thing is he's got one leg that's slightly longer than the other, which makes him a psychopath, apparently. These two having a kind of disability, staying where they were born, makes an amount of sense. And these two, seemingly, at first, for Renfield, well-adjusted, would have been, it could have been by their own choice that they were taken away by a parent who, if one of them stayed to take care of these guys here and the other took these two and went off to England. It could be literally anything, because much how my speculation about Ghost of Frankenstein, I'm not going to get a confirmation on any of this. And for the record, I shouldn't. No one should be trying to make the canonical story of this family line the way that I am, because it doesn't make any sense. But I'm here, and this is the challenge that I have posed for myself, so I'm just going to do my best. The best thought I can think is that if these are quadruplets, or at the very least close siblings, it would make sense that these two who were born with disabilities of some variety didn't leave the place that they were born, and these two left. Like I said, it could be that a parent took them, that these two were left behind and had to fend for themselves, and that's why they're crueler or something. I mean, childhood abandonment is certainly something that I feel like is gonna put you towards a poor path. Not given very much resources, so yeah, you're gonna sign up for whatever job you can get, even if that's with a mad scientist. Meanwhile, these two are a real estate agent and a decently successful journalist of some variety. It is a shame that, if we are following the logic of this story that doesn't exist, by the way, the idea that if somebody took these two away to give them a better life in another country, this one still fell afoul of Dracula and was killed by him. And that's poetic, in a way. Sad, but poetic. So that is the Dwight Frye conundrum. This is the story that we're going to be working with. A tale of quadruplets separated due to ableism and a tragic family legacy that is maybe remembered only by them. Universal, if you ever want to make the Fritz movie, you let me know. I've got it ready for you. It was both a delight and absolutely infuriating to see Dwight Frye show up in these later movies. Like, at first in my notes, it's just, oh my gosh, is that Dwight Frye? I've never, like, in that, I had never noticed that he was also in these other movies, because I wasn't looking for him. And at first I wasn't looking for him because I was just, pleasantly surprised when he came on screen and was like, we gotta blow up that castle. I'm like, that's Dwight Frye. I love that guy. And then from there on out, it was, where's Dwight Frye? Where is he? I know he's here. And then I was getting ready to do this, and I went, I should probably look at his IMDb page and see if there's anything else that I need to account for. And because I was like, okay, Renfield, I can figure that. Reporter in the Invisible Man. Universal. You're trying to get me, but you're not gonna get me, man. You can't get me. I'm too fast. I'm too smart. I'm hoping this is the most red string this project is going to get. We shall see. Hey, Universal. It's me. You know who I am. I've been really loving doing this project. I've been enjoying diving deep into all the different Universal monsters. I watched a couple of them recently that I had never seen before, and I think it's really interesting the amount of film history that you guys are so deeply involved in, and the way that you make these movies so fun and connectable, and the ways that you find to put these disparate pieces together. It's delightful. It's phenomenal, really. And I just have one problem. And it's the fact that you're lying to me. Or did you think I wasn't going to notice? You know how when I talked about the last movie, the one definitive thing I had about our location was that we were in the city of Visaria. This is kind of a big deal. It was the main location where, everything happened. It was unequivocally in Visaria. So why are you trying to gaslight me and say that it was in Village Frankenstein? Silly. You're all so silly. Everyone in this movie is so silly. Because every time they mean to say Frankenstein, they say Visaria. And anytime they mean to say Visaria, they seem to say Frankenstein. What's up with that, huh? Because you're making me feel crazy. Because they're talking about the events from the last movie that I just saw, and that I know for a fact are in Visaria. And they're saying it's in Frankenstein. And that's crazy. And I'm not crazy. I know where I'm at. I know what village I'm in. And I know where Ludwig Frankenstein's blown up castle is. And it's in the city of Visaria. It's in Visaria. I wrote it down. I put a Wolfman sticker next to it. Did you think I'd be distracted by putting hot old Boris Karloff in front of me again? That you could jangle him like keys in front of a baby and I wouldn't notice everyone saying the wrong name of the village? Like, what? It legitimately boggles me. Especially since I've set up the precedent that I have to use in-movie logic to make sense of things. And I don't know how to make sense of this one. Is everyone having this mass hallucination where we say the wrong name of the villages for each other? Or was there a point in the last 15 years that the villages just decided, hey, you know what would be really silly? What if we swap names? Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be great for everyone and not at all confusing? Specifically for the person who's trying to do a project where we track specific locations? Wouldn't that be just a gas? Those are legitimately my two possible solutions for why this happened. Because Otherwise, it makes absolutely no sense. I could see Village Frankenstein changing their name again because they don't want to be associated with the Frankensteins. That makes sense. But to not change it, but swap it for a different place that had its own different Frankenstein problem, that's weird to me. And I don't know how to make sense of that in any way. So right now, all I'm doing is anytime that I watch this movie, I just add a mental filter that anytime somebody says Visaria, I replace it with Frankenstein. And anytime that someone says Frankenstein, referring to the location, I replace it with Visaria. Because that's the only way any of this makes sense to me. Because I'm not crazy. I know the last movie was in Visaria. And you are not going to make me think otherwise, Universal. Also, apparently, Visaria and Frankenstein are 152 kilometers from each other. That is the main thing that we now know. Anyways, for something that's hopefully less confusing, let's go talk about the family tree. So for House of Frankenstein, technically, we don't get any new additions to the Frankenstein family tree. That part relatively stays the same. But we do have some additional information that in order to accept it, you're going to have to agree to my ridiculous premise as discussed in my Dwight Fry conundrum tangent. Assuming we accept all of that as fact, let me introduce you to the Niemann family. The protagonist of House of Frankenstein is Gustav Niemann, Dr. Gustav Niemann, I should say, as played by previously mentioned hot man Boris Karloff. He's just beautiful. He's a beautiful man, and I'm allowed to appreciate that. Dr. Gustav Niemann was arrested 15 years ago for doing an experiment where he put the brain of a human into the body of a dog. He did this based on notes from Henry Frankenstein's experiments because, he says, his brother worked with Frankenstein, and before his brother died, he told him Frankenstein's secrets. Originally, when I heard this, I was like, okay, well, there've been a couple of Dr. Frankenstein, so he could have been talking about either of them. But he is specifically, like, when he talks about, you know, the great things that Dr. Frankenstein did, he is specifically talking about Henry. And Henry only had one guy work with him. So the brother that Gustav is talking about has to be Fritz. Which means, if we accept the precedent as established in the Dwight Fry conundrum, that means Gustav is an additional brother to these quadruplets here. And if we're accepting that, then we also now know the family's name, which is Niemann. So we've got Fritz Niemann, Carl Niemann, Renfield Niemann, and a reporter who was never given a name, but his last name is Niemann. So this is truly one hell of a family. And if we accept that as a concept, it kind of makes some things in this movie really crazy. Quick general premise of this movie. Niemann escapes prison and first goes on some revenge killings of the people who had him put in jail, and then goes back to his laboratory where he's going to do some crazy unethical science, put people's brains in different bodies, and it's a whole thing. Larry Talbot is also there, and he wants to die because that is his one personality trait at this point in his life. Gustav, once he is broken out of prison, winds up hitching a ride with and then becoming this guy called Professor Lampini. And Professor Lampini is a touring, like, sort of circus freak show kind of a situation where he is showing, like, oddities that he's collected. His big sort of main get is he has what we learn to actually genuinely be the skeleton of Dracula that he himself got out of Dracula's castle. If we're accepting the fact that Gustav is a brother of this family, Lampini is carrying the body of the guy who killed his brother. And that's crazy. Which, in this movie, Gustav Niemann is just kind of nuts and kills people because he wants to kill people. Weirdly, giving him a family like this kind of humanizes him in that way of hearing this guy talk about, because he would have had to like step over Renfield's body in order to get to Dracula's coffin. So, assuming Gustav knows anything about that, having been in jail for 15 years, that might explain why he killed Lampini so quickly. Dr. Niemann is just kind of this crazy lunatic guy who is a brilliant scientist, but is also like a completely unfeeling murderer who doesn't care and just wants to destroy the people who destroyed him. But it is kind of interesting to put him in the context of a family, because it sort of pseudo-informs his actions in a retroactive way. Especially if we're thinking about it in when talking to Lampini and Gustav is asking him these questions about the things that have happened since he's been in jail. And he asks about what we are going to call the Village of Frankenstein. And he's like, that's a place that doesn't care for horrors. And you would think that he would follow that up with, yeah, there was a guy what done made a flesh monster that rampaged through the countryside and did kill people. But that's not what he says. What he says is, there was this guy, Dr. Niemann, who did surgery on a dog and gave him a human brain. And that's the most recent, like, horror scandal. That's kind of interesting, that the thing that the village is currently, like, hanging in the shadow of isn't the legacy of the Frankensteins, who they done named their village after. It's this one guy who did surgery on a dog to give him a person brain, which is very interesting. Because Gustav is this huge, like, Frankenstein fanboy. He spends so much time talking about, like, Frankenstein was a great scientist who could have done, he did all of these crazy things. He was an unappreciated genius who, he could have given you a normal body, friend Daniel, because he's a cool scientist and who could have done anything. And when you put that in the context of, he is a sibling of this person who directly caused this whole Frankenstein shenanigan, of having that, it comes off not looking like, oh, he's a really big fanboy. It comes off as like an attempt to embrace the family legacy, almost. Like, because if we talked about, like, Rudy left Frankenstein to go be in Visaria, so that, for any number of reasons, I'm sure, but you could easily see one of them being, I want to get away from this legacy my family has of being the guys who helped that madman make a monster. And seeing both within the same family, this running away from it versus aggressively embracing it to the point of becoming it is really interesting. And not at all what anyone was thinking of when they were writing this movie. Because this story doesn't exist. This isn't real. This is nonsense that I made up because I gave myself the challenge of being purely Watsonian for no reason. But the story that it's giving me is honestly really interesting. And I feel like I would prefer to see that play out on the screen than look at us throw Dracula out the back of our wagon. All this to say, is this absolutely, completely, and utterly ridiculous, and no one at Universal will agree with me that this is the true story? Probably, yeah. But do I think it's deeply interesting, and am I going to keep going down this rabbit hole? Oh, you betcha. Now, Niemann does die at the end of this movie, which it does mean of these original set of siblings, the only one still alive is our reporter from The Invisible Man. Which is a little sad, but I'm sure he's not going to be getting involved in the next movie. House of Dracula is not going to have anything to do with this, of that I am certain. I don't know what's going to happen next. I know I have watched this movie, but I could not tell you. I think Larry Talbot becomes our main focus again, because I remember we go to another doctor. But I don't know if there's going to be any more additions onto the family tree from here. If there are, hopefully I will have room for them, because already I'm kind of pushing it with the Neiman's up there, but for right now, this is what we're working with. At the very least, the next movie better not try to lie to me about where we are and where things have happened, because I'm not doing that again. So don't try to lie to me, Universal. Just tell me what weird mad science is happening now. Let's go to the next movie. I'm gonna do this as a 2-for-1 special because there is no helpful information in either of these movies that is relevant to my project. I'm not even gonna pull out the family tree on this one because we don't meet anybody new that we can add to it. Either on the Frankenstein front or on the Neiman front. It's just Larry Talbot. It's just Larry Talbot fumbling his way through situations and winding up in shenanigans with the monster and sort of Dracula, except all of the Dracula stuff winds up getting taken care of before Talbot gets there. Until Abbott and Costello, and then he takes a flying leap off a cliff to catch a little bat. So none of it matters for these movies. I could try to make some grand claim that Sandra Mornay has some relation at all to the Frankensteins, as she somehow has Henry's third journal, I think. Over the course of these films, Henry's diary has changed names, covers, book sizes, several times. And so, somehow, Dr. Sandra in Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein has this journal, but we don't know how she got it. She could be related in some fashion, but could very well be she found it on the black market somehow. Could be that Dracula found it and gave it to her when they started working together. Could easily be. So, I'm not going to try to make any grand, overarching claims on that one. In the style of the Dwight Frye conundrum, I could do a whole bit about the actor Lionel Atwell, as he was also an actor who showed up in several Frankenstein films, each time as a different character. His most relevant character, and probably most well-known, is from Son of Frankenstein. He's Inspector Crow, who, if you've seen Young Frankenstein, Inspector Kremp is riffing off of. So that's the most known character. And then in Ghost of Frankenstein, he was Dr. Ballmer. He was, like, Ludwig's teacher, and then was bitter that Ludwig had surpassed him, and he had become just Ludwig's assistant, which is why Igor is able to trick him into getting him to swap the monster's brain with Igor's brain when they do the big surgery. And then in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, he's the mayor of Visaria. In House of Frankenstein, he's Inspector Arntz, who is a police inspector in the city of Regalburg. And then in this movie, in House of Dracula, he plays Inspector Holtz, who is the police inspector here in Visaria. Because House of Dracula takes place in Visaria. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But the reason why I didn't do a whole other tangent section here for Lionel Atwell is because all of these movies take place at the same time. Not at the same time, but like all of these movies are roughly together in a fashion in the way that like all of Dwight Frye's films deeply were not. And his characters here aren't particularly varied. He's played 3 different police inspectors. As well as unlike Dwight Frye, these characters I do feel are distinct enough from each other. I didn't notice that it was the same actor every time. It was the person who I was with that noticed it on movie 3 of, hey, that's the same guy. And I had to go, oh, you're totally right. And I straight up missed that. So I don't think these guys are... How many of them are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't think these guys are quintuplets. I think, especially given the movie timelines, I think these are siblings, or, you know, could be cousins, frankly. So there is a much wider space for these characters to fit in, since they are distinct enough from each other that it doesn't have to be immediate relations, as well as they all have relatively similar levels of existence. Like, we've got 3 police officers, 1 mayor, and 1 doctor. So, you know, it seems like they all came from a family of some amount of means, and these guys have just made good for themselves in different places that are known to be in a similar region. Presumably, the only one of these guys that we really get a backstory on is Inspector Krogh, and he is from the Village Frankenstein. His whole backstory, the reason he has the wooden arm is because the Frankenstein monster, when Henry initially unleashed him on the countryside, his arm was ripped out by the monster during a rampage. So we know that this family is from Frankenstein, and just since then have spread out, and each of these gentlemen have found a job in relatively similar professions across the region. Easy. Not particularly mind-bending. That's why I didn't do a huge tangent for that one. But yeah, saved it for now because the last guy, Inspector Holtz, he's the last one who was introduced in House of Dracula. The only other important information really to go over is that House of Dracula is set in Vassaria. And we have to make a choice here, because given the shenanigans of House of Frankenstein, where they tried to lie to me and swap the names of the villages, we have to either interpret this as we're still swapping the names, or we're back to Vassaria as we understand it, 152 kilometers away from Village Frankenstein, where Ludwig's blown up houses, where Larry Talbot first went nuts and met the monster, where Rudy lives, where Rudy Neiman lives. That Vassaria. And it would be nice to just be able to go, cool, we're back in that Vassaria, and move on with our lives. But unfortunately, we are given a little bit of a wrench in the works, because House of Frankenstein ends with Dr. Neiman traveling to what in that movie they call Vassaria, that we were calling Village Frankenstein, because that's the only way that movie makes sense. So he dies in Village Frankenstein, where he is being carried by the Frankenstein monster. They fall into a pit of quicksand, essentially, and die. They're sucked down and they drown. Neiman is dead, at the very least. Obviously the monster isn't, because this guy just can't die, and he's gonna keep coming back for all of these movies, doing even less and less in each of these films. Until he's not even the guy that I loved from movie 1. It's fine. I don't even care, it's fine. He's just a very strong cardboard cutout that we have to electrocute, and it's fine. In House of Dracula, the Frankenstein monster's body is found holding Neiman's skeleton in underground caves in Vassaria. So, when they say Vassaria, are we picturing Village Frankenstein still? Because that's technically where he died, according to our understanding of locations. Or did he die in Village Frankenstein, and we are now in Vassaria, 152 kilometers away, and somehow they drown in their quicksand sinkhole pit and find some sort of underground current or river or something that slowly but surely took them underground 152 kilometers down to the village of Visaria that we know. These are decisions a man must make for himself, and I can't speak to how you may interpret that. I interpret that as a big middle finger from the Universal Studios scriptwriters of the 1940s, specifically at me. Personally, there's so much shenanigans in these films that, like, continuity is hanging on by a bare thread. So sure, why not? As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's quicksand in Germany anyways. In Germany or Austria, and especially not in the mountains. So, sure, the magic quicksand of the Alps sucked these guys down and spat them out 152 kilometers away. That makes sense to me. I'm choosing to believe it is the city of Visaria as we know it, because it looks more like that set that we know from Ghost of Frankenstein. It looks more like that larger, slightly more modern village than the very traditional, much more rural village that we know of Village Frankenstein. So I'm choosing to believe that this is in Visaria, not fake Visaria from House of Frankenstein. I'm not even really going to talk about Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because frankly, there is nothing in that movie. Other than Dr. Sandra having Henry's journal, but even then, that is such a bare bones thread. Like that, I can't hang my hat off that in any way, shape, or form. All these movies have been in Europe so far. This one's in Florida. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein takes place in Florida, and just off the coast of Florida. They shipped Dracula across the ocean, and homeboy pulled up in Florida. That sucks for him. Sorry, bud. It's a fun movie. Like, I love classic Hollywood comedies. I'm a kid who grew up on the Marx Brothers in a big way. So I do enjoy this movie. I don't want the record askew here in any way. I do love Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It just gives me nothing for this project. Like, I'm not adding Abbott and Costello to the Frankenstein family tree. It's just not gonna happen. It doesn't need to. But because it is technically in the continuity, it is here. Like I said, Abbott and Costello gives me nothing for this particular project. So, yeah, that is all of the important information from these last two movies. I really didn't need to watch either of them, really. It was House of Dracula was fun in that it's the closest they had gotten to making another Jekyll and Hyde movie, which is considered a Universal monster, but they haven't done anything with that. Or they hadn't, and then they did The Mummy from 2017. But nobody saw that. Nobody saw the Jekyll and Hyde in that one, despite the fact that I thought it was really fun. But that's a whole other project. Both of these movies were fun. They just didn't give me anything for this project. So, with that said, that's it. That is the end of the films that I needed to watch and the end of helpful information to help me make sense of these. So now I just gotta take all my data and go synthesize some sort of a conclusion. So, here's that conclusion. I would like to tell you the story of a family. A family that finds itself in the midst of a legacy of horror and pain. A family that finds itself scattered and fractured as it endures horror after horror, that finds itself deeply involved in these horrors. A family that seeks horrors, even if accidentally, and constantly finds themselves in the midst of such. A family that seeks to undo the previous generation's mistakes while tripping over them into their own. A family that runs from what it's afraid of, only to find it where they're going. A family that cannot help but get involved in gruesome mistakes, and even those who came so long after find themselves in the crosshairs of a legacy that they had nothing to do with, that was crafted well before they were ever a concept in this world, and find themselves having to deal with the mistakes made by people they will never meet. And this family's name is Neiman. I'm only mostly joking. Obviously, this was a really fun project for me to really dig into the Frankenstein legacy, to really see the picture as it was crafted by Universal Studios back then. It started with one guy making a pretty bad decision in one movie, and it leads to everything else on this board. Like, frankly, it also leads to the destruction of everything else on this board. I mean, some of these people are still alive. Presumably Wolf's family is still alive. Elsa is still alive. But so many more of them are dead. And so many of them endured and suffered and had to witness, like, awful things. Elsa watched her father burn to death in the castle that was their home. Twice she had to walk away from the destruction of the place that she grew up and loved. No wonder she's not in any of the sequels after the fact. That kind of trauma is awful. The things that this family has to discuss or refuses to discuss as they get older. Peter's like 9 in this movie. Can you imagine, like, even just like 10 years down the line from that, of him, like, having to ask? Imagine Wolf's face the day that Peter looks up at him from across the breakfast table and says, "Dad, do you remember when we went back to Village Frankenstein and we stayed in the family estate?" Like, can you imagine, like, what he has to tell his son? The person he almost got killed by bringing his father's monster back? Like, how do you even start that conversation with your family like that? Like, the stories that Elsa will have to tell one day to someone. I would love the movie about Elsa. I would love the movie about just about any of these guys. I mean, I have loved the movies that are about these guys. And I would love a movie to elaborate on the Neiman family story. Like, I just think there's so much interesting in this. Obviously, as previously discussed, this is a fake story that doesn't exist that I put together because I thought it would be fun. And it is fun. I think this is also a really interesting story about legacy. Hell, I would love, if Elsa ever got a movie of her own, I would love it if she interacted with one of these people. I mean, Elsa grew up in Visaria. She might not know Rudy personally, but she may have passed him in the street, interacted with him in some way. And like I discussed in that movie, Rudy probably knows who she is. Like, if he is a descendant of one of these folks who helped with the Frankenstein monster, the Frankenstein name is known to him. He is well aware of both of their legacies, even if she's only aware of hers. And that interaction would be so cool. I would love to see it. It's very interesting how much of this, because when I think of the Universal monsters, and specifically think of the Universal monster Frankensteins, I am almost always thinking of Henry. And I very rarely think of these other folks here. And in fairness, Henry had 2 movies, and the rest of these pretty much only ever had 1, save for Elsa. But still, so much of these movies are built on the legacy that he leaves behind after he's shuffled off after movie 2. I think it's very interesting. I personally maintain my opinion that I'd say around Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, the monster stops having anything interesting to do, and that's really disappointing, personally. There's no moments of reflection anymore. Like, one of the most powerful moments I think of with the monster, even though, like, Son of Frankenstein is certainly a bit of a different beast than Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, there's a great moment where, like, the monster's not able to speak, but you can see him trying to, like, process the ideas and understandings of himself in comparison to other men, specifically compared to Wolf, as they both look at themselves in a mirror together. And there's just no real moments like that after that. We get some good stuff in Ghost of Frankenstein, where Lon Chaney Jr. is playing the monster, and he also has some really good, like, expression of ideas, of being a person. When they're discussing how he's going to get his brain swapped out, he requests to have the brain of a little girl put in his head. Like, he goes and finds the little girl and brings her back and, like, taps his head and then her head in front of Ludwig to make his point. And then, yeah, I take back what I said. After that point in Ghost of Frankenstein, never again is he really a character the way that he was. And that makes me so sad, because in this story about legacy, I mean, the only reason these movies exist is because of this guy. And he doesn't have anything to say about it. Like, he's just, yeah, like I said, a very strong cardboard cutout. And it's disappointing, for sure. Doing this in tangent with the locations has specifically made me very confused and frustrated about the seeming lack of communication between scriptwriters, between films, because these movies were coming out, like, within years of each other. Like, I think Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is 43, and then House of Frankenstein is 44. Yeah, nailed it. 43, 44. And that's when they do the village swap. That's seemingly deliberately done to confuse me. I mean, we complain today about franchises that build without communication amongst themselves. And this is certainly better than some, but there is still such a distinct lack of that communication, of bringing ideas through in a way that is satisfying. And these are schlock movies made from the 40s, pumped out industrially, literally, in order to make money and get butts in seats. So I really can't be asking too much from them. Media was a different beast at the time. There were different ideas of, you know, what is good storytelling, what does a good story need. But still, I feel I am allowed to demand a better quality. I can enjoy the things that I enjoy and still wish there were things about them that are different. And I'm going to. I think the thing I'm the most proud of with this is finding a semi-cohesive way to bring this story together. And while it is very desperate and disparate, I'm still very proud of it. And I'm very proud of, like, the way I have, even just to myself, pulled these themes together in this way. Like having this context in my head now, this context that doesn't exist, but exists to me. Like, when I rewatch, like, something like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman or Ghost of Frankenstein, and I see the bit where Rudy is getting chased by the monster, I think about the context that character is in, of being this ultimate legacy character who presumably was born in Frankenstein, moved to Visaria to leave behind the Frankenstein of it all, of this legacy of horror that he inherited from a loathed father, either of these guys were awful, and so whoever they were, he would have wanted nothing to do with them or to be associated with them or the horrible, awful things that they did. And to have that literally chase him down the street, moving 152 kilometers away, and it still comes back to find him. That's so cool. That's a good story. That's a tasty sandwich I want a good bite out of. Did I learn anything from this experience? A bit. Mostly, I learned a lot about Dwight Frye and his life. While I was digging into his different characters, I also dug into his life a little bit, just to try to understand, like, who he was and why he was doing all of these bit parts. And I learned about the sort of tragedy of his life, how he died young and died because of his beliefs. He couldn't get treatment. While he might have been very frustrated about the legacy that he didn't get to leave, I do feel very honored by the legacy that he did leave, and I feel good about kind of trying to put it in an even further position of trying to make what might have to him felt like disparate parts and small bits. I feel very proud in getting to kind of take them together and to make a really interesting story that, you know, again, no one at Universal will accept as a true story, but maybe to him might have made all of those little bit parts feel like more of a whole. Other things I learned. Larry Talbot is a really fun character, and I do enjoy the way that he is brought into these other stories. I think it's so interesting on the topic of legacy, having a character who doesn't have a sequel of his own. There are no pure Wolfman sequels. His story is deliberately and directly ingrained with both Frankenstein, specifically Frankenstein, but also Dracula. Like, he is so entwined with these other creatures. His story does not exist without them. And I think that's really fascinating. It's really all about legacy in the end of these pieces of art that were made by so many people years ago, decades ago. And still we watch them, still we talk about them, still we have posters of them on our wall. Still we, make new collections of DVDs for. Still we engage with these pieces of media, even the ones that aren't very good, and especially the ones that make us go a little crazy. We have this legacy of story that didn't start with Universal, but was directly and deliberately affected by them in such a way that the name Frankenstein cannot be separated from this collection of very good to very bad films. Like, they will forever be entwined. And to some people, that's awful and that sucks and that makes them very, very mad. And I understand those people and I see why they say that. But I also look at this as the piece of art that it is, that was made by so many people. And I'm not going to sit here and claim that it's better than the novel. I would never do that. But I do think as a piece of art on its own, I think it's so interesting and has so many really good ideas and such interesting characters that while in their own time they're not delivered on in the way that we would maybe like them now, I think gives us such a good jumping off point. I think why there is so much of this that has hung around and has really clung to the cultural zeitgeist is because there is so much here to dig into. It gives us a general picture, a beautiful picture, but doesn't give us all the details. and lets kind of the imagination fill in the gaps. And sometimes those gaps are left there more deliberately than others. Sometimes it's not an artistic choice. Sometimes your scriptwriters didn't talk to each other, and now we swapped the names of the villages again. It's all about legacy in the end. And this is a pretty great legacy. I enjoyed playing with it. I hope you enjoyed getting to watch me play with it. And I hope this was as interesting for you as it was for me. Consider this my enthusiastic urge to watch some of these older films, even the ones that you maybe didn't necessarily think you would want to, such as A Ghost of Frankenstein. Because sometimes you will find something really, really interesting in them. Even if it's not what they want you to focus on, there's always something to be found. It really is about legacy at the end. And now, this is mine. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you joining me on my journey of absolute madness. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you did, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think, let me know where I went wrong, if there's something that I misobserved or credited incorrectly. As long as you do it nicely. I am a human being and I have feelings and I'm very sensitive about the things that I make. But seriously, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, check out some of the other videos on here. This is a very large tangent from the kinds of things that I usually make on this channel. My primary show is The Frankenfiles, where I do deep dives on different adaptations of Frankenstein. And for the record, this is not a replacement for the 1931 Frankenstein. I will do a proper Frankenfiles episode on that one day. I'm waiting for the right day, though. And if you really enjoyed this and want to support this and ensure that more things like this are made, we have both a Ko-fi and a Patreon. Links are down in the box down there. I don't have a cute sign-off for this like I do for the Frankenfiles. What's a good cute sign-off I could do for this? And remember, even if you die, you can always come back in the sequel. Till next time.
Pepe Sylvia. This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look in the mail. Well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia.